Cool.
Good. Oh yeah, I can see the recording button now.
Yeah, we're recording. Also, so good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming along to this session where Andy Tweddle, Senior Content Manager at GoCardless, is going to be revealing his findings from a survey he did about the average salary for UK content marketers. So I'm very excited to see what patterns he's seen. After his presentation, if you've got any questions, we'll do a little Q&A. So feel free to post those as we go, and I'll put them forward to Andy in the second half. Also, we'll upload this recording and all the slides into the members area next week if you don't manage to stick around for all of this. And I will now pass over to Andy.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm going to start sharing my screen. So you bear with me 1 second to make sure it works right when I do this. Loading. Attention. There we go. Okay, so to give a bit of the intro and the background to kind of like why I'm here today and why I've bothered to do this. So my name, yeah, as Christina mentioned, my name is Andy Tweddle. I work for GoCardless, which is a payments provider. I've been there about 2.5 years now, and I used to work at a company called Distilled, which is a bit niche. But then when people do know it, they really like the fact that I work there. So if there's like, maybe no one knows this, but they're a search agency, so I thought I'd mention that I work there as well. But yeah, so on to the point of all this. So obviously, as Christina mentioned, it's going to be about the average salaries for UK content people. So this came about is because like a colleague of mine, GoCardless, another content marketer, we were going through the performance, the review cycle, which leads on to like salary reviews. And he asked me if I'm paid fairly. And my gut said yes, but when I thought about it and he asked me why I thought that way, I was like, I have no idea. I guess the reason that I thought my salary was fair is because I've been in content for 6 years and my salary has slowly increased from kind of roughly from year to year. So, but not mine. I was like, well, then I must have a good salary. But the truth is I have absolutely no idea. And as I said, that's what sparked the idea of the survey. So I kind of like Christina, I said, I think this will be interesting to your community. And she agreed. So we started looking at it and we honed in on the UK because I think it's particularly tricky to get this kind of data. There's a few US surveys out there which are really good and like definitely worth a look. But the problem is if they have any like global responses, they tend to do they'll do currency conversion and it's a completely different market. The sense is the US people get paid better and there's massive variances in cost of living. So it's kind of like I thought we wanted something that's specifically for the UK based, I should say, content marketers of the world. And I guess what I really wanted to get out of this survey was I wanted content people based in the UK to know their worth, to like really understand if they were getting paid what is a fair salary for their expertise and their experience, and to be able to go into work knowing that they're paid fairly, because that's I think one of the biggest things. Obviously, salary is a massive deal for like living your life, but another thing is that kind of like sense of calm. Like if you're always going into work worried that you're being underpaid or worried you're not being paid what you're worth, you get this sense of like, I don't know, it's like just not feeling valued. It's just nice to go in knowing you're paid well and you can put that thought to one side as you're doing your work. And then finally, if you're not paid fairly, this is a bit longer term, but like the tools to like fix that. And like, don't get me wrong, the survey is just the start. Like this isn't big enough that we have to solve all of them. Sorry, but hopefully it's a start for anyone who's watching and anyone who reads the survey to understand if they're paid fairly, and some tips on start correcting it if they are like way off the mark. So yeah, I'll start with like what the demographics were for the survey. So we had 76 responses, which I'd love to get a few more, but that's like does give us a really good start to this, and it still gives us some really rich insights. In terms of like the gender identity, it was actually skewed more towards women. So we had 69% female, about 31% male respondents. In terms of ethnic groups, like perhaps unsurprisingly, just because of the makeup of the UK as a whole, it was predominantly white people, but we did have some responses from people from different ethnic groups. And in terms of location, most came from the Greater London area, which I actually expected it to be a little bit higher, but we're about 60% from Greater London area, and we had a decent amount of people from Yorkshire, a decent amount of people from the southeast of England, and then like a long tail of other regions of the UK. And then in terms of like, so this, if you've taken the salary, you probably realize there's the salaried versus the freelance. So we asked a bunch of questions to everyone, which I'll go through. We also asked a couple of questions to particularly the people who are in salaried roles, either it doesn't matter in-house or agency, and people who work in a freelance or contract capacity. We also had a very small portion of business owners as well there. And then in terms of the content skills on like the people answered here, perhaps unsurprisingly, content writing, content strategy, proofreading, and then what we call copywriting were like really like common skills, like well over half of the, actually more than 75% of the respondents have those skills. And then there's a long tail of like other things. I mean, like you can see it here, but like managing the writers, social media management, and then all the way down to the podcast creation and editing, which I do expect if we ask this in if we keep asking this every year, that'll probably continue to increase. So it's not just the typical, what you might think of stereotypical content marketer or content writer. There's people involved in all aspects of the content world who've taken part in the survey. And then this is just, couldn't do a lot of analysis from this, but just to prove like the amount of like, this is kind of, I think when we get to the survey results, proves like how difficult it is to get good salary information so far, is there's so many different titles, and some of them will mean very similar things, some of them mean vastly different things. But like, I can't remember, of the 76 people we interviewed, there's something like a salary survey, there was something like 45 to 50 different titles, which shows like how which explains why it's hard to get survey data, because you have a very similar but slightly different title to someone who's probably in a similar role, similar expertise, similar experience. And then just for the absolute, like for the integrity of the data, and just to point this out, there was one survey respondent who earned a whopping, I think it was well over £150,000 more than the next respondent in terms of their salary data, their salary. And that completely, like, it threw off everything. So if I kept that in, I wanted to make it as like keep the integrity as much as possible. But if we kept that in, it kind of took away some of the insights. Like, it didn't really tell you a lot because everything was so massively skewed. So I put the little glasses, like, cheers, whoever that person is, they should probably come on and do a webinar telling us how they've got such a ridiculous salary. But for the purpose of the data, they've been removed as like a complete outlier of the data. So yeah, onto the actual results, the bit that you're probably most interested in. Yeah, the average salary for all respondents is just under 43,000, so 42,800. And when you split that out by the salaried and the freelancers, salary employees earn a bit less. They earn around 40,000 on average. And the average income of freelancers and contractors is more like 51,000. So yeah, they're the real like top line stats from this. And 42,830 is a combination of everything. And then we looked into how experience affects earnings. So like the salary versus the number of years experience you have working in content. If you've been around for 0 to 3 years, your average salary is 34,000 or nearly 35,000. If you're somewhere in the 4 to 7 year mark, so like, I mean, it's hard to know exactly when to cut these off, but like somewhere in like the middle level of experience, you're just under 44,000 as an average. And if you've been working content for 8 or more years, your average is over 50,000. So you can see there's a definite like progression in this. And when you break that down, I'm sorry, I think I might have missed a slide out here, but I'll come back to that one. But I'm just moving on to whether like it basically does appear to be in London, because there wasn't quite enough data to break it down by each different region. So I had to do the slightly simplistic thing of what are salaries in London versus salaries outside of London. And it's actually better in the rest of the UK. Now, this is probably the most like surprising finding of the lot. And I can like, I don't have a perfect answer for why that's happening. I mean, I can speculate that, you know, the rise of remote working, that people have moved around all over the country during COVID, that other certain regional hubs are starting to kind of catch up with London. No, this aren't, as far as the survey goes, overtake it. But according to our survey, there's not a huge advantage just from pure salary of being based in London. Oh yeah, sorry. I've got 2 slides mixed up here. So this is the slide I was trying to get to before, which was when you break down the salary, the years experience, like literally year by year. And while it's not completely, it doesn't go perfectly from A to B, you can see the general trend that, like, you know, all the way from like one year where it's about 20,000 all the way up to 8 or 9 years where it's you're heading up towards a 60,000 mark. There's a few outliers there, but I think you can see the general trend that perhaps unsurprisingly, your salary increases as your experience increases. And this is one of the ones I think was most interesting, was that we looked at salary by gender and salary by ethnicity. So for the average male content marketer earns just under 46,000, whereas the average female content marketer earns around 41,500. And that is kind of disappointing, but not necessarily surprising. I mean, there's a big gender pay gap, like in the UK across all industries, and as much as like I guess the earlier demographic data might suggest that there are more women working in content than men, there's still a pay gap there that needs to be addressed. And then we did the same with white versus minority ethnic, and I completely understand that like grouping anyone who's classed as minority ethnic into one group isn't ideal. Like there will be, you know, a lot of context, a lot of kind of data depending on exactly which group you fall into, but just purely because we didn't have enough data to really get proper insights out of one particular group, I've had to do the white versus minority ethnic. And while the pay gap is less than the gender pay gap, there is still a pay gap between white content people and minority ethnic content people of about just under £3,000. And in terms of percentage wise, the gender pay gap for UK content's just under 10%, whereas the UK average pay gap, according to the most recent stats I could find, is 15.5%. So I guess there's a small positive there that it's better than the UK average, but that's still like a really, I guess that's the state of affairs. There's such a big pay gap for men versus women. And then kind of even more, which is more of a shame, in the ethnicity pay gap in the UK content salary was 7.4%, whereas the UK average is only 2.3%. So while the sample size was fairly small, like there's a signal there that there's a definite pay gap depending on what ethnicity you are, which again is a bit of a shame. Of course, it's a big shame. And then some stuff purely for the in-house folks here. We asked how like seniority. So kind of there's obviously seniority versus experience. There's a lot of overlap, but we looked at like actual how people perceive their role within a company. So we had 1 or 2 responses for like entry level and for like C-suite level, but the majority came from people who identify themselves as either associate level, midweight/senior, and then head of or director level. And you can see like there's a very clear uptick there. Average of just over 31,000 for associates, 41,000 if you're midweight or senior, and then it takes a big jump to 65, nearly 66,000 if you are, a head of or a director. And again, this is one of the more like expected findings, but it shows that how as you move up, as you're standing within a company and your seniority within a company increases, there is a big scope to really for your salary to increase as well. And then what about the freelancers? So we also asked about day rates and article prices. So we asked the average freelance what you'd expect your day rate to be, and also if you work in a different way, what you would charge for a 1,000 word blog post. And it was £426 for the average freelance day rate, and £352 for the average 1,000 word blog post. And fair play to the freelancers, that means you're churning out well over 1,000 words a day if those two things do like connect up correctly, because it means that you're I don't think I could churn out 1,000 words, 1,000 good words in a day. And so that's kind of most of the actual like the core salary stats. We also asked a few questions around like attitudes and how salaries have been affected in the last year, a bit of a nod to COVID as well. And basically this was purely for the in-house people, but we asked them how their content roles, kind of what happened during COVID and were they furloughed. And thankfully, I guess 4 in 5, 80% nearly, didn't get furloughed at all during COVID, which is good. And 15% of those were furloughed, but they're fully back at work now. And that leaves about 6% who were furloughed and are still furloughed to some extent. So yeah, obviously for anyone here who is watching, and if they are furloughed, I get that anyone who's gone through it, like it must be like it's a big deal to them, obviously. But I guess as an industry, as a group, content has fared fairly well during COVID. And then we asked everyone if their salary or their income has increased in the last 12 months. And I guess my thought would be no, it's not going to be great because the belts have been tightened. It's been a tough year because of COVID. But the truth was, it's actually quite a good picture. Almost 60% of people had their increased their salary in the last year. 36% of those by over 10%, and only a very small portion actually saw their salary decrease. So like as a whole, like taking into account furlough, taking into account salary increases, the content industry is done quite well. And I think this is a big one. Like, do you think you're paid fairly? This is what sparked my whole idea for doing this survey in the first place. And we found basically that nearly 60% think yes, and that's a good sign. But there's still a quarter of people who don't think they're fairly paid, and 16% of people fall into what my attitude is that I don't fully understand if I'm paid well or not, and that's half the battle as well. But like I think that'd be interesting. Like perception it's different to reality. So you've answered, if you're on the call and you did the survey, you've answered this question. I'd be really keen now. If you look at that question, if you answered yes, and you go and check your salary against where you sit on those salary survey answers, if you are paid as fairly as you think, or possibly vice versa. If you think you weren't paid fairly, it turns out you are within roughly the right band of where you should be for your in your experience and your seniority. We also asked if people are going to consider changing roles in 12 months, which obviously could be for many reasons, but often the reason to change role is because you want to get better paid for the work you're doing. Quite an even, well, not even, but quite like a varied split of people there. 42% of people are considering it. And then, yeah, like about 31% of people saying they won't. But that, I mean, I'm not sure exactly how much to draw from this, but I think it's interesting that, yeah, there is a chunk of people who are considering changing in the next 12 months. And you would hope when you change, one of the benefits of changing job is that's probably the easiest time to ask for a better salary. It's easier to get than if you're trying to get a better salary in the company you're already in. And then we also asked if people the next role is going to be in content. 77% said yes, and 20% aren't sure. Thankfully, only less than 3% said their next role is not going to be in content. Like I think this is I think the content as a role, as a discipline, while it's become a lot more popular in the last few years, I think there's still a lot of scope for it to to get more people in and to do a better job of, well, what we're doing right now is kind of like stuff like these surveys, exactly what Christine is doing with the community, is like really creating a sense that we are like a community of people, a community of job roles that perhaps in the past have been missing because content's been like a really vague, unclear kind of title. And all the survey data in mind, what if you're looking at it and you think, no, I don't get paid fairly, what can I do to get a fairer or better salary? And I'm going to go through a lot of these things perhaps unsurprisingly based on my experience. Like I hope these tips are useful, but I'm one person who's definitely muddled through getting better salaries as my career has gone on. And I think the first one is kind of obvious, but it's like really know your worth. So like this survey is obviously just one place to get a data point, and I hope it's useful. But there are obviously there's the Glassdoor salary tool, which is tough because it's not great if you have to have like a slightly odd title, or you have an extra like place title, or you work somewhere where there isn't a huge amount of people in that role. But it's a good start. Like I said, other surveys like ones that weren't necessarily made for the UK are still useful to understand like the jumps in salary that people tend to take. Or if you're UK based and you're working for a company that isn't necessarily UK based itself, you might find some value in that. Advertised salaries on job roles and contract depending, because I know some companies are a bit funny about this and like weird contract wording, but like just talk to your colleagues and talk to your industry friends about it. Like the more we like dispel this myth that like, and I'm still scared about it, like discussing salary, we shouldn't do it, then the better we'll understand whether we're paid fairly or not. And the kind of thing is none of these provide one perfect answer. Like it's best to really like try and like sort of use a combination of these to really understand your worth. And then as a wider group, this is more of something we all have to do. It's not one person's going to be able to change the way salaries are seen, but this is kind of basically advocating for better like industry, better practices. So I looked out on this when I joined GoCardless. I had no idea they did regular salary benchmarking. They benchmark salaries, how they did it, but it turns out they do. And that has been one of the easiest routes to getting salary increases. In addition to like, doing, I guess, getting good performance reviews, is working for a company where they're regularly checking that, making sure that your seniority and your role, you are well matched for people in the company and well matched for similar, however your company views itself, they have similar like benchmarks. And that my salary has gone up sometimes without me having to do anything, which is obviously which is fantastic. But it's not all companies do it. So kind of when you're thinking either where you work or you think of moving jobs, ask them how and if they benchmark, and who do they benchmark themselves against. And then ask for this is such a sly dig at Christina, but it's not at all. Ask for salary ranges on job adverts. Like, I mean, I like most job adverts don't have them. Some do, some give ranges, but like the more that we can gently push companies to giving salary ranges, gives us a better sense of what other jobs are out there going for. And finally, like prepare for that question. So if you are going to move jobs, or potentially if you are being given a promotion and there's some negotiation going on there, ask what your salary expectations, like when you ask what your salary expectations are, make sure you know what salary you actually want. So that comes back to knowing your worth, really understand, and don't give a range with a lower end, because I've done that before and been bitten because they come back with the lower end of the range, and then I realized that's not actually what I wanted. I wanted the higher end of the range, but I said the range because I was too scared. Push for their salary expectations first. Like obviously you can't keep going down this route if they're not going to tell you, but there's no harm in saying like, well, what are your salary expectations? What is typical for this role in your company? And some might give you a range, some might not, but then kind of know when to drop the question as well. And finally, know why you deserve the salary that you want. So your worth. Like obviously come on with the reasons why that salary is fair for someone in your expertise, plus all the reasons that you are qualified for the job, why you're good at what you do as well. Kind of combining those together, saying yes, you should hire me because I'm good, I'll be good at the job, and also this is good market rate, this is what that is therefore worth for you to pay me, basically. And that's it. Sorry, Christine, that did go on a little bit longer than I said it would. But yeah, if anyone has any questions, please fire away.
Thank you, Andy. That was so interesting. Lots of surprising, some bits unsurprising, but some surprising bits in there.
Yeah.
Particularly Londoners earning less than non-Londoners. Like just typically assume London people are going to earn more. That was interesting. And we've got lots of questions that have come through, so I might jump straight into those actually. So let's go with one that came before you started. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. Yeah, that's cool. So this one's from Molly, and she was asking, how do you know you're at a point in your career when you can start negotiating for a higher salary?
Well, I mean, one of the obvious things is using stuff like this. Like one of if like I said on I think one of the last slides, like this survey is not comprehensive enough to be the absolute source of truth, but the combination of things is to know that knows when you are knowing you are completely out of whack with what salary you should be getting, which is one reason to ask. I guess the other one that you might be getting, I'm not sure, Molly, is that when are you kind of well positioned in a company to ask for a pay rise? I guess that goes hand in hand with how you're performing. There's some quite common wisdom that I've seen it listed as if you want a promotion, you have to be working at that level for 6 months of the place you want to be promoted to advocate for that promotion. And I think there's probably some kind of fair point in that from a salary point of view. Obviously, salary increases can happen with in between promotions, but you want to be working to a certain level. If let's say you're working within a band and there is a way to get from like you might be we have levels at GoCardless, like you might be a J to a K. If you're working towards that, at some point within that, there's like in those performance reviews, come on with the reasons that you've kind of like progressed, and therefore tie that to the fact that therefore you deserve a slightly better salary. And then then you tie in the what that salary should be based on that. Now if you are, it's obviously like jumping from associate to midway, it might be a big jump, but that kind of progression of seniority and progression of experience is like a good like way of saying, well, then I need a higher salary. And also, like, if it goes on for a long time, I wouldn't say an ultimatum is overdoing it, but like, if you have a good manager, be real with them that you need it, your salary, you need a good salary to live well, to know you're progressing, and not that you're going to jump ship immediately, but it's a line in the sand. It's important for you to do that, to stay long term at a company that you work for.
Yeah, that's a good point. You do all the practical steps, but then there comes a point, if you're still not being paid fairly, that you have to give them the option. And
sometimes it won't, like, that's the thing, like sometimes it won't happen. You can do all that, you can present them all the reasons you should get a better salary, and you can do all this if you do to convince them, and sometimes you won't, and then you have a decision to make whether you move on or not.
And some of the things that you've mentioned here, if you're happy to talk about any specific examples where you've got a pay rise yourself, like what did that look like? What was the process from when you first decided you were going to ask for one to when you made the ask and then got one? How long was it? What did you do?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with the real world thing is a lot of this is dumb luck. Like a lot of it, a lot of it's like looking back and saying, I should have done this, I should have done that, or I did this without realizing. There's a lot of dumb luck at play there. But stuff you can do is I touched on it before, is tied in with like performance reviews. So when performance reviews are coming up, like obviously you want to do well in performance reviews, but make sure that goes as well as possible. Come on with the reasons why and then once it's basically when that happens, that is obviously like a very good point. And I've invested you've given me a particularly good performance review this time around, and it's been a year, let's say. That's a pretty common one, like since my last salary increase. I think I deserve a raise for that. And the one thing the thing about GoCardless in particular, I don't know about anyone else's companies, is that when you get the good, which is the salary benchmarking, which gives you a good sense of like, I guess when this happens, like some at least like you get a good vibe that you're getting the right salary because they're comparing it to other people in the company. That also takes away like the negotiation power at the same time. So like, it's a double-edged sword that like I don't have a lot of power for negotiation because their answer is typically this is in line with benchmarks and internal and external benchmarks. And as long as those internal and external benchmarks are good and well thought out, then at the same time, yes, I don't really have any reason to negotiate salary, because if you have like free reign to negotiate, then that tends to when salaries get out of whack, as someone negotiates and they demand something and then leave. So like there's always like two sides at play there about negotiating. And then in terms of like joining new companies, that's where I've messed up the most. I said it on the thing. I've gone in, I want a salary between X and Y because I was too scared to say I want Y, and then they offer you X, and you're like, I did say I'd be happy with that. And then you realize, and then you come in the company and there's that tinge of disappointment because you're like, why didn't I just say I wanted that amount? They might not have given it to me, but I'll never know. They just went, okay, he says this and we'll give him that. And that's where I've made the biggest mistakes is, so basically when you know what salary you're worth and know what you want, say that salary.
Yes,
basically.
And I think it's a good indicator. You should be feeling a little bit uncomfortable when you say what you want. It shouldn't feel comfortable.
Exactly, yeah.
It will always feel really horrible, but that's fine. That's a good sign that you're hitting a good mark. Okay, jumping into some of the other questions we've got here. So Sana, I think you touched on this a little bit, but she said, do you think company size has an impact on salary too? Like salary as a smaller business versus salary at a corporation? Should have asked.
It's a good question.
We'll do this for the next survey. Ask that.
Yeah. No, it's a good question. I think it probably does, but I think the companies, like how the company positions itself in terms of like growth is probably the biggest deal, because like a big, like obviously like you go at the extreme end, like a scrappy startup typically won't pay particularly well. But if a company has big ambitions, and I guess that's one of the reasons why I come back to GoCardless, because it's not easy, it's my knowledge, but that's why they have done the salary benchmarking, is because they see themselves an ambitious company. And while it's not completely tied to salary, they see the idea that paying a salary that is on a certain high level of benchmark attracts a higher level of talent, supposedly. So that's one reason. So yeah, it depends on the company's ambition. Yeah, like I mean, that's the thing. It's a really good question. I don't have a definite answer for that, and you are right. That's probably when we do this. If we do the salary survey next year, let's add that question in, because that is another good filter for salaries, definitely.
Yeah, good suggestion, Sana. We have a question from an anonymous attendee. I have no idea how to ask my company about salary. Any advice?
First bit would be talk to your manager. So if you have if you have a good relationship with your line manager, that's definitely like the place to start. Like chat with them that you are you get it. I mean, most places your line manager will know your salary. You have this salary, you think, you have a suspicion that you deserve to be paid more. Like, what is the process for doing that? How do I go about getting that? And they should be able to, like, company specific advice, they should be able to direct you into the next spot. And as long as you are performing to the level you think you are and they agree, they should back you as well. So like, just start with them. And depending on what company, like what size of company you're in, like the people ops, HR, whatever the team's called, they might have someone either solely or partially focused on remuneration. I think GoCardless is that we're 500 people, and I think we're hiring our first, I can't remember that title, but like remuneration and rewards and benefits people person. So like, whose job it is to like solely look after these things, and they might be able to offer advice. And then yeah, if you are feeling brave enough and there's nothing in your contract that says you can't, speak to other people in the business who either do the same role as you or are the same seniority as you. And yeah, just like, and then, but at some point you have to like the same way that telling someone your salary is uncomfortable, asking for a salary raise is inherently uncomfortable. But if you come on with the reasons, what you're worth, and you come on with the reasons why you deserve a pay rise of any kind, then you put yourself in a good position.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good practical first step to speak with your line manager.
I've just seen not a question, but a comment saying, don't let pushy recruitment agents talk you down on that salary. 100% agree. 100% agree. I don't. I've been through that process before, and I'm not having. I do get recruitment agents because some of them are fantastic. But yes, if there's big competition, and especially if a company's using multiple recruiters to get someone in, they're suddenly incentivized to basically bring a great candidate who's going to cost them a little bit less money. So it's yes, don't let them talk you down. If they're really honest that your salary is too high for that role, then that's not the right role for you.
Back yourself. Okay, question from another one from Molly here. Are you able to fairly say how many years experience correlates to a middleweight role? Might be difficult to do so.
I think it's difficult. Like I think I had the 0 to 3, 4 to 7, 8 to 10 plus, and something like that. But it also like depends on where you sit in a company. So companies have different companies have different frameworks. Obviously, the bigger the company is, the more thought out those frameworks are. So like ours is, I joined GoCardless 2.5 years ago as a grade. If I stick in the IC route, so the individual contributor route, and don't go into management, I joined as a grade 3 out of 6, and now a grade 4 out of 6. So kind of I've gone from I guess if you look at it that way, the lower end of midweight to the higher end of midweight. But so like if you have frameworks that basically tell you this and how the company views it, that's a good way to know when you say to that company, I want a pay rise, that's how they view you. Yeah, beyond that, it's hard. Like I think I don't know, you see a lot of, I think somewhere around the 4 year mark, you probably go to midweight, but that is that is more gut feel than real, like, yeah, definite answer.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. And a question, shifting slightly onto a freelance based question on rates. It's from Simon. I had a client tell me they're considering using The Hoff, an online agency that charges $250 for 200 words copy. I mean, holy F. We should work as a group on a good response to that. Any first thoughts?
$250 for 200 words of copy.
Cheap.
Yeah. I'm not like, I think the one thing I've never worked for any kind of long period of 2,000 words of copy. So I said 200 words of copy. I was like, that's great. That's fine. That's great. No, 2,000 words of copy. Yeah, I mean, like, see what you get. So if you do that, see what comes back. Like, I'm sorry. This is probably not good. This is maybe not good advice for the person who's asking this question, because I'm basically saying, well, go ahead and see how it works out. But like, I think those things usually work. Like, if they go for it, they tend to realize that the quality is not great. But I've never worked freelance for any extended period of time. So, if you want to weigh in, Christina, or anyone else can weigh into that.
I'm interested to see what the quality of that content is, because I find it's, when I've paid cheap before, I've spent half my time then editing, and I might as well editing it myself. So again, I guess it's hard to see the quality of that.
Interestingly, at GoCardless, I mean, this is not a hard and fast rule, because we're not mature enough to kind of have this. But I work more with freelancers who charge by have day rates rather than by the word. I know both are still very common, but it seems to be, I don't know whether it's just like my sort of confirmation bias, but it seems to be a shift away towards like day rates rather than by the word. But anyway, that's a side note.
Oh, so you pay your writers, it's a day rate, you're saying?
Yeah, we typically pay day rates. Like there's some people who we've worked with before on older contracts, not contracts, sorry, but like older agreements, we'll go by the word, but typically now we'll go with the day rate stuff, and it tends to be better, because I think the thing that sometimes with charging by the word, like I want to incentivize writers to write the best thing, even if that doesn't need the max word count. So I still pay them fairly without the 500. Like, I still rather pay them whatever the day rate. I'd rather pay them the day rate for 1,500 words of great copy than 2,000 words of copy that just has 500 words of filler in. And I got to do it because obviously people want them out here. So I think sometimes it hopefully it works out for both parties. They still get the rate they want, and I get it, to my mind, better quality copy.
Yeah, there is that danger when you're paying by word that they're just incentivized to do filler words.
Yeah.
Simon's just put his hand up to kind of do a talk message, so I'm going to allow Simon to talk now.
Cool.
There you go, Simon.
Oh, sorry, that's embarrassing, guys. I was just trying to say, no, it's not 200 words, it's 2,000 words.
Sorry, it did take me a little while to figure that out. I was like, what's the problem? Yeah.
Okay, cool. Right, that's that. And again, another question from Louise. She's just wondering if you know, can new employers check what your previous salary was with the employer, or do they have to take your word for it?
From a previous employer, this is probably worth a double check, but to my knowledge, no. I'm fairly sure that from a reference point of view, I think companies are only legally allowed to ask for basically like confirmation that you worked in a role and you worked there for a certain period of time. This is probably worth checking up on, but I'm fairly sure they can't ask for that information.
Yeah, if anyone knows as well, for sure, do let us know in the chat. I'm not 100% if they on that either. But I hope they can't find out. Okay. I think, has anyone got any other questions for this one? I guess another one I was going to ask about is, again, it was interesting about London being paid slightly less than non-London. Do you have any thoughts on why that might be?
I guess it's just that, I think I mentioned it very briefly when I was talking through, as I guess that I can speculate that people in the last year have probably relocated to some extent. I'm not saying like there's been some absolute mass migration, but I think a lot of people will have either left London or they're temporary or permanently because we've gone in this kind of wide scale lockdown. I think some places, like I guess as content becomes like a more recognized role. Before I think you'd have seen more of a concentration in the roles that were available in London, and you start to see like now them kind of filtering out into the rest of the world. Beyond that, I'm not 100% sure. I suppose one of the things you could say is, and it's tough to know this, I could probably dig into data more, is we also asked people who lived in Greater London or the south, in the southeast, and I am definitely like speculating here, but people who live, I think there'll be a lot of senior content people who do the typical move out to the suburbs just outside of London to continue their career. So I wouldn't be surprised if some of the higher outside of London salaries come from people living just outside of London. But but that was only but even then that's only a small amount of respondents. So there's still not the big change that I thought there would be.
Yeah, that could be an interesting reason for it. And the rise of remote.
I think we've still got more of that to see. But I think that's definitely a part of it now there's definitely a rise in remote working. And especially for freelancers, but I think even for in-house, there's definitely a shift towards that.
And Louise is just asking, would you mind sharing how you conducted the survey? What software did you use?
We used Google Forms because I'm cheap and don't have the money to use something else. No, because it was the first one, we used Google Forms. Did a decent amount of research into how to conduct surveys, how to phrase questions, how to basically not ask the leading questions. If I was to do this again and do it more, there's some really good tools out there like a test, but they cost money. So I need to do this at scale to use that. But I actually found Google Forms, like it was tough to it was a bit tough to analyze the data, but getting the data and building the survey was actually quite straightforward.
Thank you for that. And hopefully we'll do a bigger one next year and add in, just get your feedback about extra areas that you'd all want it segmented.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Like I mean, Christina knows this. When we went through the kind of like the drafting of the survey, we did a bit of back and forth, and then asked a handful of friends and colleagues to get their opinion. But this is V1, so I'm sure there's a lot of filters that other people would love to know. And obviously we need, it's a really good start, but we need more respondents next time round to get real insight into like some of the really like specific, at the moment I've got London, not London, white, not white, which is not great, but we just need more respondents to get that insight.
Yeah, I'm hopeful the content industry is going to be even bigger next year, so we'll get loads more.
And I think people just identifying as it as well. I think there's a lot of people who probably work in content who not necessarily like identify as that, or people who work in general marketing roles, but content is there. Like I think a lot of people work in marketing and they find out content's the channel that's working really well for them. So they're not like a content person, but they are heavily involved in content. So I think there's a lot of people out there.
Yeah, for sure. All right then, Andy, thank you very much for all your insights. That was really interesting. I think everyone will agree.
Yeah, thank you for having me. That was really fun. I really enjoyed that.
I'm glad you did. Lots of thank yous coming through in the chat. Yeah, thanks so much. Amazing. This was a great session from Veronica. Yeah, lots of thank yous. And as I said, everyone, we will be sharing the slides and this recording next week, and the results, it will be going public in early mid-February, more publicly. Before we had a good sneak peek there of what we found.
Yeah, definitely.
All right then, enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Brilliant. Bye-bye.